Hey, good morning, boys and girls. How we doing? Welcome to week number 6 of this distance learning. Happy fun stuff. This week is going to be a short week. Today, Monday, is a new distance learning stuff for you. Time to get caught up. Wednesday is going to be a time to get caught up as well. Wednesday. So that leaves Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for you to go ahead and get caught up on things. That's what I'm going to have you do this week, is just kind of get caught up on assignments you might be behind in, assignments you might be late with, and I'll just finish up this assignment I gave you last week about Dred and Harriet Scott and Eliza Winston. I'd like to go ahead and talk to you about that comparison and contrast one if I could, real quick. So if you want to, I'll go ahead and help you through this right now, give you a little read aloud. So Dred Scott was a slave, a pretty interesting story behind this. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and pay attention. We'll go ahead and get to this together. So Dred Scott and Harriet Robinson were enslaved people brought to Fort Snelling by their owners. They met at Fort Snelling and married in 1836. Okay, so they're brought to Fort Snelling in 1836. Now, at that time, that was not considered Minnesota territory. We became a state in 1858. We became a territory in 1849. So before 1849, when we became Minnesota territory, we were a part of Wisconsin territory. I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but yeah. After their wedding, Harriet Scott's owner, Indian agent Lawrence Tolliver, remember we talked about him before, either sold her or gave her to her husband's owner. He was Dr. John Emerson, a military surgeon stationed at the fort. Fort Snelling was in free territory. Free meaning no slaves. Slavery was illegal in free territory, but no one tried to enforce the law. When Dr. Emerson returned to Missouri, a state where slavery was legal, he took Dred and Harriet Scott with him. In 1846, the Scotts sued for freedom in the Missouri courts. They claimed that because they had lived in free territory, they were free. Now, they waited till they got back to Missouri to sue for their freedom. Remember, Missouri was a state that allowed slavery. Fort Snelling was in free territory. Slavery was illegal there. They claimed that because they had lived in free territory, they were free. For the next 11 years, the case filtered through the court system until it reached the United States Supreme Court. Now, the United States Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. What they had done is they had sued for their freedom, and they had been turned down. So they appealed it, been turned down again, and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that the United States Supreme Court has made in the history of our country. In a landmark 1857 decision, the United States Supreme Court ruled against the Scots and refused to give them their freedom. Okay? This is a landmark decision. It's called the Dred Scott decision, and you're going to hear about this in 7th grade. You're going to hear about this in 8th grade and in college, high school and college. The Dred Scott decision, some believe, is one of the causes of the Civil War. And it has a strong Minnesota connection. The court stated that the African Americans were not citizens, so they had no rights under the Constitution. So the United States Supreme Court said basically African Americans are not citizens, and because they're not citizens, they have no rights. The Constitution does not apply to them. Whoa, that was a slap in the face. The ruling also stated that enslaved people were considered property, and that slave owners could not be deprived of their property. Wow! You guys know what property is. Holy cow. So the Supreme Court said that enslaved people basically are property. They're not people. So they had no rights to the Constitution, and they had to be given back to their owners. This was a huge shockwave. That same year, though, the Scots owners freed them. So they went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court, Roger Taney, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, this was their ruling, denied him his freedom. So he was ordered to go back to his owner. The same year, though, the Scots owners freed them. So after the Supreme Court said, nope, you're not people, you're property, you're to go back to your owner, their owners freed them. Dred, Harriet, and their two daughters, Eliza and Lizzie, lived together in freedom for a little over a year. In 1858, Dred Scott died of tuberculosis, a common lung disease at the time. So the United States Supreme Court's decision in this case was an important factor in the coming of the Civil War. The ruling said that Congress did not have the legal right to prevent slavery from expanding. Remember, that was the big deal. Abraham Lincoln did not say he was going to eliminate slavery when he was elected president. He just said he wanted to stop it from spreading. The Supreme Court said that Congress did not have a legal right to prevent slavery from expanding, from spreading. Many Southerners believed that meant the right to enslave people was now protected forever. Many Northerners feared slavery would spread into Western territories if they didn't do something to stop it. So, people on both sides became more firm in their beliefs. It was hard to imagine how the two sides could come together. More and more Americans became convinced that war was coming. Again, this was 1857 and 1858. Okay? So you have here African Americans, two of them, suing for their freedom. The Supreme Court said, nope, you're not people, you're property, go back to your owners. Their owners freed them. Poor guy died from tuberculosis just a little bit later. Supreme Court said, told the Congress, you cannot stop the spread of slavery. Slavery should be allowed to continue on its own. This was huge. This sent shockwaves, especially in the North, where most Northerners were against slavery. Like it said here, most Southerners thought this now meant that slavery would go on forever. Okay, so big deal in our system, the Dred Scott decision. All right, keep this in mind. I want you to come back to this. We're going to talk about Eliza Winston in my next video. Thank you very much.